Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 50 Movies number 5. This video is a part of a series of videos where I count down my top 50 favorite movies of my lifetime. In my top 10, I'm doing a single video review for each film in my top 10, so now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, my top 5. And my number 5 favorite movie of my lifetime is Aliens. Now, the great debate out there seems to be which movie is better, Alien or Aliens, and this is something I've seen debated and gone back and forth about a lot. I remember when I was a teenager hanging out with some friends. We wanted to watch an Alien movie, and we were split on which one we wanted to watch, so we flipped the coin and Aliens won, but my friends who were sore losers and wanted to see Alien just walked out after about a half hour. But at any rate, for me personally, my own personal take on the matter, it's not even a question, it's not even a competition. Aliens is by far the superior film to Alien. While I'm sure Alien was original and unique when it was first released, it has been done a billion times after, whereas in my opinion Aliens is completely unique and hasn't been done the same before or after the film was released, because when you boil it down, Alien was just a typical horror movie about a monster going around killing people one by one until there's one person left who defeats the monster. Sure, it was set in space, had cool plot points like the android who also turned on the humans and the interest of studying the aliens, but all in all, when you get down to it, it's just your typical horror movie about a scary monster. Now, I know some may try to argue that the same about Aliens, but I would very strongly disagree. While there have been a multitude of films that tried to imitate what Aliens made successful, in my view, they all failed miserably, where I feel there were plenty of films that not only recaptured the same feel as Alien, but were actually better than it. Aliens is a truly unique film, and I have never seen anything like it. Aliens blends the genres of horror, science fiction, action, and suspense to create a masterful story with rich characters whom you really are invested in. In fact, whenever I see someone doing a top 10 list specific to a genre, or talking about what is the best film of a specific genre, whenever Aliens is brought up, which it often is because it's such a great movie, there's always massive disagreement on whether or not it fits in that genre, because the truth is Aliens doesn't neatly fit into any one genre, and that's because it is truly a unique film. In fact, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a huge fan of the Alien franchise, and instead just say I'm a huge fan of the film Aliens. As I mentioned, I felt it was far superior to Alien, and don't even get me started on the other sequels, which weren't even good. Alien 3 had some good points, but ultimately was a disaster ruined by greedy studios, and not even awesome actors and an awesome director could save that film. And Alien Resurrection was, that was just a total disaster, a mismatch of ideas that just came off as comically bad. Don't even get me started on Alien vs. Predator movies. Those were, oh my god, quality bad. It's just unbelievable. I like to pretend that those films don't exist. However, I like the idea of Alien vs. Predator movies, and I would actually really like to see those films rebooted and done properly, as there was a graphic novel done in the 90s, I believe, of Aliens vs. Predator, and those novels were actually really good, but the films decided to just completely disregard those novels that already got the formula right and just make up some silly and ridiculous and outrageously bad story. But out of all the Alien movies, only the first two were decent and didn't suck, and out of those two, Aliens was far superior. However, I'm not opposed to the idea of an Alien sequel as long as it's done properly. That's why I'm really excited about Neil Blomkamp's project to do an Alien sequel. There was talk it would have the characters of Ripley and Hicks and would take place after Aliens and erase the events of Alien 3, and that sounded like the greatest thing to me. I love the idea of erasing Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, much in the same way X-Men Days of Future Past erased X-Men 2 and 3. But apparently it's been said that the movie would take place between Alien and Aliens, and that makes no sense to me. I'd much rather that they erase Alien 3, Neil Blomkamp, for those who don't know, is the guy who directed District 9, an amazing science fiction film, and he's a huge fan of Alien and Aliens, so I'm sure he could do it justice. I'm sure a lot of people would love for them to erase Alien 3, mainly because they freaking killed Newt and Hicks in the very intro of that film before the film actually really started. That was the worst possible move they could possibly do, and it was just giving the middle finger to the fans of this beloved film, because the whole point of Aliens was Ripley's struggle to protect Newt, and to just kill her off like that is such an insult to this great film. So I would love for Blomkamp to just erase that. Anyway, getting back to the movie Aliens itself, when I went to film school, I remember attending a lecture done by a director-producer that worked in the industry, and he gave an hour-long lecture all about Aliens and how it was the perfect film. He talked mostly about the narrative structure of the film and how it was just perfect and what other up-and-coming writers should model their works off of. I won't try to remember or emulate what he said. I couldn't be as eloquent, but I thought he made a really good case. The way the narrative structure works in this film is it's really a steady journey that just gets better and better with each scene. That's what I think this film does best. As much as, the beginning of the film is quite slow and many find it boring, but that's because it's a good steady build. I know a lot of films love to start with some big explosive and suspenseful action-packed scene at the beginning in order to draw audiences in right away, but I think this approach of slowly building to something works much better. In the first film, Ripley is kind of portrayed in like a sexy manner, as the big battle at the end takes place while she's in her underwear. However, in this film, that's not how she's portrayed at all. Although Sigourney Weaver is a beautiful woman, the way she's portrayed in this film was not at all in this sexy or ditzy sex object-like fashion like most female characters in science fiction action films are portrayed. Her portrayal here was very much more of a protective mother, and she wasn't sexualized at all. In fact, all the women in this film were portrayed as strong, independent characters, the other most notable character being Vasquez, one of the Space Marines, who was an incredibly strong and formidable character. The theme of motherhood was a central theme to this film. In nature, they often say that the most dangerous animal is a mother protecting her children, and this theme is used a lot in this film. As Ripley encounters the sole survivor of a colony ravaged by the aliens, who is a little girl named Newt, Ripley forms a motherly relationship with this girl who, having lost her parents, looks to Ripley as a mother as well. This relationship, which was executed so well in the way that it really got the audiences involved, will become the main theme of the film. But what's really interesting is the parallel of motherly protection this film portrays in the film's main antagonist, the aliens, as the main villain, revealed towards the end of the film, is the alien queen whose purpose is to protect all her children, the other aliens. So in essence, the queen alien and Ripley are doing the same thing, trying to protect their children, but their interests are opposed. Speaking about the aliens, that was, basically the gimmick of this film is that it was a sequel to a film called Alien, which was about a singular alien going around killing people, whereas this sequel was sold as having a multitude of aliens, hence the title of the film. A great aspect of the original Alien was less is more, as the alien was most scary when you did not see it, and I know many felt this aspect would be lost on a film that multiplied the number of deadly aliens hunting the main characters. However, it wasn't. This film still very much used the less is more aspect of storytelling, particularly when compared to modern films, which often go overboard with using CGI to show all of the action. It sometimes could be a blessing in disguise to use expensive and hard to use practical effects that could be only used very scarcely, because it forced them to only use it when necessary, which could actually be far more effective in making a scary film, as well as the fact that this film had a very small budget for a action film of this scope. They only had 6 alien suits that they used throughout the entire film. They just used them over and over again in clever ways in order to make it look like there was a whole army of aliens. And many of the scenes actually had very shaky cinematography that focused more on the humans' reaction than it did the aliens themselves. One of the very effective devices this film uses is the movement detector sensors that several Marines had, which was a very effective way of increasing suspense, because you could hear these beeps of movements that indicated that the aliens were getting closer, and display would show how many meters away they were, and they would show it was getting closer. That was so much more effective. Just hearing that beep, that boop boop, it just than actually seeing the aliens, and it just really amped up the tension and really scared the shit out of you. Other than the aliens' spectacular narrative structure, another aspect that makes this film great is the cast of strong characters. It's quite easy for films like these to have cardboard characters who are obviously stereotypes, and although many of the characters are based off of obvious archetypes, like the sleazy corporatist, the badass hero marine, the whiny comic relief, the android, and the little girl, all these characters are expanded beyond their archetypes, and then in the limited screen time that they have, come off as realistic and relatable, which is particularly difficult for these marine characters who can often come off as two-dimensional, but the film does a fantastic job of making them seem like real people. I'm also very happy when they have a robot or an artificial person, as Bishop said he prefers the term, turn out to not be the bad guy and in fact be the good guy. I've talked about this before in other reviews, that I really hate the killer robot cliche, and I love when films go against that, which is part of the reason why I thought 2010 was better than 2001, because 2001 featured this evil robot killing machine, but 2010 explained that the robot only behaved that way because the humans fucked with his programming, and the computers in 2010 were really friendly. So something similar happens here, where in Alien the robot ended up turning against the humans in the name of scientific research, but in this film, not only does the robot Bishop turn out to be a really awesome guy, also it's the human who ends up turning against the others in the name of scientific research. And not only the human, but the corporatist who did it for greed, and I like that aspect so much better. And plus, Bishop was just awesome. Another thing you'll know about me if you're familiar with my movie reviews is that I think music is a big aspect to what makes a film great, and the music in this film was composed by James Horner and was absolutely fantastic. James Horner just came off of doing the soundtrack for Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Both films I thought where the soundtrack was one of the best elements of the film. And in my opinion, these two films had by far the best soundtrack out of any Star Trek film. And when I first sat down and watched Aliens in its entirety, which was when I was about 17, even though I had seen bits and pieces of it throughout the years growing up, I didn't really sit down and enjoy it to its fullest until I was about 17, and when I really understood old enough to understand what the movie was about. At which time I was totally in love with Star Trek 2 and 3 soundtracks. Without even knowing it was the same guy who did both films, I instantly recognized it was the same composer, because the soundtracks were actually very similar, and you could hear some of the same melodies in both of them. It's probably because they were made roughly around the same time period as Horner's. Later soundtracks are completely different. He's mostly known for his music on films like Braveheart, Titanic, and Avatar. The brilliant music exceeded the typical scary horror jump scare music or blood pumping action music, although it did have elements of both. It went beyond and truly added atmosphere to the film. The ending credit music is a good example of having the right amount of happiness injected into it, as well as being creepy at the same time and having a sense of uneasiness after what they had just went through. And I have to mention that this is yet another example of a film that has an extended version or director's cut that is far superior to the theatrical release. In the lecture I mentioned earlier where the guy was talking about how great of a film Aliens was, he put down the extended version and said that he could see why these scenes were cut and the film would have been better off without them, and it is literally impossible for me to disagree more with him. I absolutely love those scenes, and I thought it was an absolute travesty that they were cut, as they enhanced the film so much. In particular, the scene that explained that Ripley's daughter had died at the age of 62, that was so vital to the character's story arc in the film. I can't believe that was cut. And also, we get this awesome scene that introduces Newt and shows her with her family, and her father was the one who discovered the ship of, alien facehuggers that was in the first film. That scene was also vital to the story, but such an awesome scene. One of my favorite scenes in the whole film. There were also a couple of other scenes that helped build suspense, so no, if anyone tells you the theatrical release is better than the director's cut, don't believe them. The director's cut is far superior and should be the only version you watch. Now, you may think I just always prefer the extended version, as this is the third time in my top 10 that I talked about how the extended version of a film was much better than the theatrical release. The other two examples being Leon the Professional and Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. But just wait until I get to my number 3 favorite film. That's actually an example where I felt the director's cut was shit and the theatrical version was much better. But I'll talk about that when I get to it. The Butterfly Effect, which was number 34 on my top 50, is another example of where I felt the theatrical release was far better than the director's cut. So, now's the time in my video when I do my spoiler section, so if by some bizarre reason you have yet to see Aliens, first of all, what's wrong with you? Stop what you're doing right now this very second and go watch the film. But then once you're done doing that, come back and watch the rest of this video. But if you're like most people and you have seen the film, you can continue onwards. So speaking of my Return of the King review, I talked about in that review the common complaint that that film had multiple endings. But, I'm surprised no one makes that complaint about this film, because I actually felt it's more applicable here, as this film does have multiple endings. And although I don't have a problem with that, to me they're not quite as necessary as Return of the King's, and yet everyone seems willing to give them a pass more than Return of the King. You have the Space Marines escape from the planet. That's ending number 1. And then you have Ripley rescue Newt from the Queen. That's ending number 2. And then you have Bishop rescuing Ripley and Newt from the planet and the colony exploding. That's ending number 3. And then you have the Queen alien attack on the ship and Ripley blowing it out to space. So that's ending number 4. And then you have Newt and Ripley climb into the hibernation chambers. That's ending number 5. The lecture I referred to earlier, referred to this extra ending with the Queen alien attacking on the ship, another reason why the film was so great. I'm not sure I'd go that far, but I didn't have a problem with it. But I felt Return of the King's so-called multiple endings were actually more necessary than these films' so-called multiple endings. And yes, I'm still bitter about that. That being said, I absolutely love the scene where Ripley takes on the alien queen with the power loader. You kind of knew when that thing was introduced towards the beginning of the film that it would come into play later on. It was like a Chekhov's gun type situation. And it was an excellent payoff. But now I'll mention the one drawback I thought this film had, and that's that it stuck to the stereotypical horror movie trope of having all the characters die off one at a time until there was only a few left. I guess having one horror movie cliche over all the other ones that it avoided isn't so bad, but it was the one and only thing about this film that never really sat right with me. Although most horror movie films only one person survives, and in this film 3 people survive, or 4 if you count Bishop, but since he got split in half, I'm not sure if he counts. Yeah, not that big of a deal, but I felt the film could have been better without it. But overall, Aliens, in my opinion, is my favorite action movie, my favorite horror movie, my favorite suspense movie, and one of my favorite science fiction movies. Not only did it blend all these genres, but it also managed to be the best of almost all of them. And this is, in my opinion, by far James Cameron's best film, and his, the perfect film that he made. It far exceeds anything he's done since, including Terminator 2 and Titanic. This was his best film and the height of his career, and I'll have to agree with my lecturer that this is the perfect example of a film with a solid narrative structure that manages to involve us with the story like very few films can. So that's it for my top 50 movies number 5. If you haven't already, you should check out the other videos in my top 50 movie series. There'll be links to them in the description below. And make sure you subscribe so you can keep up with the remaining 4 videos in my top 50. And check out my channel for many other film and TV reviews. And thanks a lot for watching.